Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of Learning DITA Live 2019. I am Alan Pringle of Scriptorium, and I am going to be moderating the first 2 sessions today. This session is on online collaboration for DITA, and it's by Chad Dybdahl of Adobe. Learning DITA Live is brought to you by Scriptorium, the content strategy experts. Since 1997, Scriptorium has helped companies manage, structure, organize, and distribute content in an efficient way. If you are trying to figure out how the DITA model can best support your content, or you are setting up a new DITA system, please contact us. We would love to work with you. LearningDITA.com and Learning DITA Live would not be possible without the help from our sponsors. Adobe is a sponsor of Learning DITA, and we thank them very much for their support. I want to tell you a little bit about how this webcast is going to work. Attendees are muted during the webcast. Even so, we still want your input during the event. You can type your questions and your comments at any time in the questions module, and our speaker will answer those questions at the end of the session. So if you would, take a few moments now to locate that questions module in the GoToWebinar interface. At the beginning of the question and answer phase, please look for a link to a session evaluation form. We very much appreciate your feedback on these sessions. And with that, I am going to turn things over to Chad. Chad, are you there?
I sure am. Thanks, Alan. So, all right, let's go ahead and share my screen. And we should be all set.
You're great. Yep.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate the introduction. And thanks to everyone on the webinar for your time and attention today. I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour or so with you. And my name, as Alan mentioned, is Chad Dybdahl. I'm a solutions consultant with Adobe Technical Communications. I work with our customers around the world to really learn more about their content practices, how we can help them move forward and kind of future-proof their content and so on. And so today, what I want to talk to you about is really one of the key sticking points that I see a lot of the times with all the customers that I talk to around the world in existing DITA implementations, and even in non-DITA implementations. You'll probably get something out of this as well. And that really is the idea of review processes and how those can kind of become very manual and sort of ad hoc and really kind of difficult to manage for different organizations. And so let's jump into the slides. And I do want to warn you, as has become fashionable, that we're going to start out with a trigger warning. This next image may be deeply disturbing to a lot of you, so I just want to make sure you're prepared. I'm going to go ahead and bring that up now. So it's the red pen. And so one of the things that I really think about a lot, and we'll talk about a bit about red pen processes later on, as I call them, is this is really when I got my start in the technical writing industry, it was very paper-based. Red pens were the norm, and the editor would come back and would just be a sea of red. I was maybe not a very good technical writer when I started. So this is what I want to talk about today, though, is these kind of manual processes that crop up around documentation. You see them over and over again, and some people are still using the red pen method. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So manual processes, not great, right? Well, sometimes they are, right? I might have some manual processes that I enjoy as an individual, and some of that might be the manual process of buying and picking up and smelling a book. It's got that smell to it when you go to like a used bookstore. It's great. I thought this might speak to my audience here today. We're all in the business of content, and there's just something about a physical book and the act of actually turning the pages, having that the weight of it in your hands. There's something special about that you don't get on an e-reader type device. So that's an example of a manual process that's good and enjoyable, right? Another example of a manual process that is becoming increasingly uncommon is the idea of a handwritten letter or a note from someone. Largely confined, I suppose, to greeting cards these days. But when you get a handwritten note from somebody, it just has something that's a little more personal and immediate than, well, maybe not immediate, but a little more, it kind of touches you in a way that a text message or an email doesn't, right? So that's another example of a manual process that's actually good. And then finally, and on a personal note, I've been a music lover all my life. And so one of the manual processes that I enjoy is the collection and the use of my vinyl records. So I have a fairly substantial collection of those. I've got a number of different turntables that I play them on throughout the house. And there's just something about having that physical object in your hand and opening it up and looking at all of the art and really kind of understanding where the artist is coming from and having that kind of physical anchor to the music, which is ephemeral in nature, right? And so that's another process I enjoy. It's a bit different from the idea of streaming, which I also take advantage of as well because of the convenience factor. I can't put a record in a slot in my car and listen to that. Probably get very scratched up if I did that. So, I mean, that's just another example of a manual process that, and increasingly, a lot more people have been enjoying, right? So it's making a bit of a comeback. On the other hand, one of the real, this is sort of a common joke in the community of people who enjoy collecting and listening to their vinyl records. And the caption here says the two things that really drew me to vinyl were the expense and the inconvenience. And so, the records, they're heavy. These are one record is not so bad, but you have a couple hundred, that's a heavy collection of records, and heaven forbid you have to actually move with it. And then obviously the stereo setup, and that is a totally separate conversation. It becomes a disease when you have upgrade-itis here. So it can really become very expensive and inconvenient. Much like our red pen process. So we talk about expense. We may not be writing a check for the process itself, but we're paying the people involved. And I do talk to organizations who still use this type of process that I'm going to talk about here in just a minute today. And so going back to kind of my history in the technical writing field, this is how I got started, right? So I was brought in as an entry-level technical writer. I would go and get an envelope from my mailbox, which I still had at that point in the office. And in that envelope, there would be a set of manual pages, physical paper manual pages, on which there might be Post-it notes and some scribbles and some red pen marks. So I'd receive these handwritten edits from a subject matter expert, whether that be from the support team or the development team. I'd get that content handwritten to me, and it wasn't always legible. So then my job was to take that piece of paper or stack of paper and manually incorporate those edits into my source. I was using FrameMaker 7 at the time, so that might give you an idea of how long I've been doing this. And so I was really manually incorporating those edits. So I couldn't copy and paste from the paper, so I had to type those in. Then I would go ahead and print out a hard copy of the changes again. and put that in my editor's inbox. Her desk was right next to mine, so she would just get a pile of papers from me every day that would have the updated content. And so she would go through it. She had a box of red pens. There were a ton of them. I don't know. She must have kept Bic in business for years just with the red pens she was using. She would go through it with these red pens, mark them up, and I would get it back in my inbox, and I would go through and manually incorporate the edits, and that cycle would repeat over and over again. So really an intensely manual process, not something that I really want to, it's not a value-added activity for really anyone involved, right? So this is really a way that slows down my content velocity in significant degrees. So what was wrong with it? Well, we always did it that way, right? So that's I think we hear that a lot as people who are talking about DITA specifically. So one key problem to a paper-based process like that is there's no visibility into it whatsoever, right? If I'm the subject matter expert, I have no idea where my edits are in the process. We weren't even in the same building a lot of the time, so they can't come over and ask, and then I'd have to go and dig into either my editor's inbox and try to find it and understand where we're at in the process with it. There's significant amounts of manual effort. All this manual review of paper and things, manually keying changes back into to my source material. Really a lot of manual effort that's not value added in any meaningful way. It also introduces the opportunity for errors, bad handwriting, my inability to actually type accurately rather than being able to incorporate those changes automatically. Lots of paper going on. So we have stacks of paper that we're creating every month, and then finally we have to store that someplace. And I worked in the financial industry, so it had to be stored for 7 years. We stored it off-site in a storage facility, but it was a whole process. I box it up and seal it and label it, and then it goes off and gets stored and collects dust for 7 years. Okay, so now we might have a more modern twist on that, right? Maybe we're doing our authoring in Word. And I'm going to email that Word document to my reviewers to get their feedback. And I might have dozens of reviewers, each of which actually gets their own copy because we're not storing it centrally. We're just emailing it around. And then at this same idea, maybe I can copy paste now, so a little bit of an improvement perhaps. But I can copy and paste the content from, you can see, I got copy of this user guide, and I've got to sort through the different versions that have been emailed back to me, figure out which feedback is actually valuable, and then incorporate it back into my source again. So a little more modern, might be a little bit better, might be quite a bit better actually, but still, is it a lot better? So it's really chaotic. It's really uncontrolled. So email, again, don't have a lot of traceability into where these things are going, who's doing what at any given time. There's no opportunity for my reviewers to interact with each other unless they do a reply all, which nobody wants. And so we're really still having these sort of, even within my single document, these kind of silos of reviewers who don't really interact with each other in a meaningful way. We still have the opportunity for errors, right? So if I'm copying and pasting, I can make a mistake doing that. And finally, you're using Word, which I think nobody enjoys. And so DITA alone, for all of its benefits, right? The reuse, translation capabilities, all of the different multi-channel publishing, all the different benefits I get from DITA. For this specific problem, DITA alone can't be the answer, right? I can't email a topic to somebody, a DITA topic, and expect them to know what on earth is going on, right? If they open it up, it'll open in Notepad, and they'll say, well, I don't want to see all this markup in the final deliverable. What are you even doing? So DITA by itself does not inherently solve this problem, right? It solves a lot of problems, but it doesn't solve this one. And that's really where we're going to talk about bringing in a content management system and allowing that to power things like review processes, workflow, approvals, and finally the publishing at the end of it. And so this very lonely DITA head is kind of locked in the fetal position. So how can we help him? How can we make him less lonely? So let's think about one more process before we move forward. So, and this is something I hear a lot, right? So we've got people who are doing their authoring in DITA. They are generating some type of review PDF from the DITA Open Toolkit. They then, again, we're talking about email. So I'm emailing this document around to different reviewers. You know, maybe if I'm very, very lucky, they're using commenting features in the PDF tool to register their feedback, provide that feedback. And still, what I have to do is take those comments, collate them somehow, and pull them manually back into my source. So, you know, like I said, DITA by itself, DITA alone, does not fix this problem, right? It just makes the tools different. It doesn't change the process fundamentally in any kind of meaningful way. And so then the other thing is, if I'm working in DITA and I do ask somebody to review a single topic, right? Maybe I send them an HTML rendition of that topic that I want them to take a look at. It's still lacking that context. So if I'm reviewing a single topic alone, one thing I hear a lot about is our reviewers still want to see the full context of the document. We can't provide, we as the technical communicators or information architects, we understand the benefits and why we're authoring in a topic-based format and so on. But the reviewers, they don't really care about that. They care about the final product. And so they really want to be able to see this content that they're reviewing in context. And sometimes that might result in unsolicited feedback on some of the topics that may already be approved. Excuse me, may already be approved. And you know, they might go a little wild in terms of the type of feedback they provide. And they also still can't see each other's comments. So if I generate, you know, DITA OT allows me to generate a RTF document, and there's tools in the market that allow you to generate kind of more modern Word documents out of your DITA content, but they still can't see each other's comments. And there's still this opportunity for errors. Things can get lost in the shuffle, right? If I've got 12 reviewers or you know, more than that, these comments can become, you know, very chaotic. They're still locked away in individual copies of the document. And I don't necessarily want feedback on all of those pieces of content that I'm sending out, just the ones that I've asked for feedback on. So how do we control that in a kind of granular way? And so the last slide, we were talking about how context is king. Context is important, but I believe that collaboration is king here. And that's who, or what we really should be thinking about as we look at our review processes and how our reviewers can actually interact with one another during that process, and then be able to take the feedback that they've provided, act on it in a meaningful way that allows me to avoid those kind of copy-paste errors, losing comments because, you know, I didn't catch an email or something like that. So really what we need to do is facilitate this idea of collaboration, and, you know, enable our business users who don't know anything about DITA and frankly don't care to really work together to, you know, with the end goal of improving the quality of the documentation we're producing, right? That's what everybody wants. but it's really hard to achieve when everyone's working in isolation, maybe making conflicting comments, not able to really see what each other's thoughts are on any given topic or subject. And so really, this idea of empowering business users through collaboration, I think, is going to become increasingly important as we think about how we manage our content going forward. So how can we do that? Like I said, DITA is great for facilitating reuse, multi-channel publishing, etc., but it doesn't have any built-in mechanisms for allowing things like collaborative review. And that's where a content management system is really going to come into play for you. It doesn't need to be Adobe's, but certainly this is what I'm going to do is present one vision of how this might work, and hopefully spark some thoughts for you for how you might be able to approach these types of problems going forward. So let's think about this map. I have a spaceship operations manual. Unfortunately, the spaceship we're looking at has gone out of service, which is sort of sad. Not as sad as the Opportunity rover dying last month, but still oh no, this month, but still sad, right? So I've got this map. I'm working on it as the writer here. I'm going ahead and creating some conditional text. I've got my TOC built out in form of a map, and we've got some content built in. I'm ready to go ahead and get this content reviewed by my reviewers. So first, some stats about the map. Looks like it's got 43 topics in it. None of them are missing. We're not missing any elements. 43 of the topics are in draft status. So that's kind of normal, right? We started drafting out our content here. It's got to start someplace, so it started in this draft status. I'm going to be able to go ahead and get an overview of where I'm at in terms of each topic within the map, and I can drill down here and see actually more information about each of these if I need to. Okay, so as the writer, we got to get going on this, right? I'm done writing. I need my reviewers to weigh in and make sure that I can incorporate the feedback that they have provided, and we need to be able to get this spaceship to market here soon. I'm sure there's a huge pent-up demand for multi-billion-dollar spacecraft on the market today. So we're really losing revenue every day that we actually delay getting to market with this. And the last piece is this piece of user documentation that we've got to get approved. And as you can see, Mr. Musk here, Elon is really deeply involved in the documentation aspect of the spaceship program that he's put together, and he wants to get this out the door as fast as possible. So we've given it a project, we've assigned it to our reviewers, we've put in Elon's request here. Let's give it a due date of tomorrow, because what he wants, and I'm going to send all of my topics along for the ride, just to make sure that everyone can review everything I want to get out the door. So then as a reviewer, I need a notification, right? So I'm going to be notified that I have a task. My comment here comes through, so I've used the magic word here at the organization that I'm working with. We got direction from the top that we need this to get out the door as soon as possible. We don't have time for the manual processes that we talked about earlier. Certainly not the printing it out and mailing it via inter-office mail to people. I don't even know if that's still a thing, but I guess it could be. Using red pens to mark it up. We don't have time for that. This has to get out the door now, right? So we've got the notification here. They get emailed to, of course, so that they can actually get interrupted during their day, like email likes to do for us. And so as the reviewer, what I need is, I don't need to look at the DITA markup underneath. Preferably, I don't even need to know that it is DITA markup, right? I need a simple tool that allows me to get in, register my feedback, and get out, right? And so this particular person, Carleen Avery, has decided that we really don't want to actively discourage the use of our spaceship product. So she's decided to strike through this particular paragraph here, saying that you shouldn't ever fly a spaceship. I think that's a reasonable amount of discouragement. If you got enough money, go ahead, right? However, this is a legal topic, right? And based on Willie's comment over here, it seems that Carleen may not actually be a legal expert. So she is actually being argued with by our friend Willie here and say, we need this statement in here because legal reasons. So this is a way that, with the other processes that we talked about, that really wasn't possible in the previous world unless we had, document review meetings, which if you've sat through those, can be quite long and quite enjoyable. This is sort of the online version of a document review meeting, except we don't all have to sit in the same room for 3 hours and review the document. So really a way to enable the kind of collaborative approach to reviewing this content, weeding out some of the changes that might not be appropriate before they get to your desk as a writer, and being able to just have a conversation around the content that's being produced, and just get it to market much faster than some of the other processes that we talked about before. So then Willie has decided that he wants to be helpful as well. So he is actually going to insert some inline content here about, the previous sentence talks about not being able to guide you about flying the spaceship. That's not the purpose of this guide. So he'd like to see a reference to our pilot guide, which happens to be hidden in the glove box of the spaceship. I don't know if spaceships have glove boxes. I imagine they have someplace they can store things like manuals, however. So that's his contribution, in addition to kind of beating down Carleen in the legal arena here. So then, as the writer, what I really need is a way to review my content, review the feedback that I've received from my subject matter experts. And so what I can do is actually take a look within the context of this kind of marked up version of the topic, and go ahead and filter that based on the reviewer whose comments I would like to see, and finally make some changes to the way I'm interacting with this content, or the feedback that I've gotten based on review type, status, etc. So really important to be able to, if you've got, imagine dozens of reviewers coming in here marking all of this up, it can get very chaotic. Even that would still be better than collating dozens of copies of a Word document and the feedback those contain. But this way we can really interact with the feedback in a way that allows us to drill down to the types of feedback that we want to work with at any given point in time. And then we want to be able to actually pull that feedback back into the source. So this is really a replacement for the copy-paste manual keying types of activities that we saw in some of the older review processes that we looked at the beginning of the hour. And really, this is where we're looking at mitigating risk of miskeying or missing a letter when we copy and paste the content from wherever the review was done. So if we can automatically bring that in here, clean it up a little bit for the final publication, and just move on with our day, check it in, and go ahead and publish, that's a good thing. And then we, of course, need to be able to accept and reject these changes and kind of work on them within the context of our source topic. And so that's what we see here, is the ability to just accept and reject changes in a manner that everyone's going to be familiar with going forward. All of this rolls up, though, underneath projects. So we want to be able to go ahead and manage those projects in a really easy way. So the task that we created earlier gets rolled up under this, this user guide update project. I can see who it's assigned to, who is going to be holding me up if it's overdue, etc. So we really want to be able to manage our projects in a way that's visual, so I'm not just tracking them on a spreadsheet or something. Or worse yet, I talked about my first experience as a technical writer. There was sort of a manual cover page with a checklist and things on it. So we want to avoid that type of manual effort. Certainly when we move to a more modern approach to our document review and update processes. So having done all of that, we can see the status of all of our topics has changed. So now we can have 43 total topics. 43 of them have been reviewed, and that means they're ready to go out the door and be published in whatever format I need, sent off for translation, etc. So really a great way to visualize the status of all of the content within a given map or collection of maps, and be able to really act on that and understand exactly the moment at which I can go ahead and push this out the door and start selling my spaceships. So isn't that better? If we go ahead here and change it up a little bit, now we're looking at a DITA player on the shelf, and we can talk about the two things that really drew me to DITA were the reuse and the content velocity, and where we can really increase that last part is by establishing efficient and usable, manageable workflows and review processes for our business users, and really empower them to take that next step into the future of authoring content, being able to manage it really effectively, streamline those processes to the greatest degree possible, and allow us to get to market that much faster. And I must have talked really fast because I thought this was going to take about 45 minutes and it took half an hour. So I apologize for that part. Maybe open the floor up for questions then.
That's quite all right. I'm sure we can fill some of that time up with questions. Not a problem. We are going to drop into the chat, the questions module. We will drop in a link to the evaluation survey, and we'll also drop again the link to the recordings for all of these sessions. We have a playlist that we have put up on YouTube, and we can send you a link so you can look at that embedded on learningdita.com. And just so you know, we try to get videos up by the end of the next day. So you will see this session by sometime tomorrow. Okay, first question. Can you speak about any other systems for managing review other than Adobe's?
I'm not intimately familiar with other systems than Adobe's. So I know that other CMSs also offer similar facilities. So this is just the one I had access to make screenshots of. But really, yeah, I mean, it's important to, I'm not going to mention any of our competitors by name, but I think everyone knows who they are. So, there are all, everybody has sort of a way of managing this. It just kind of depends on what's going to be most flexible and work for you.
And I would say that is a very fair and accurate answer. Here's another question. How do you persuade reviewers who really like the idea of marking up that piece of paper or PDF that the more real-time collaborative process is a better one?
That's a great question. And that's really one of the biggest challenges, not just with reviewers, right, but with DITA project in general, is this kind of change management and the people aspect. And most of the problems you have within a DITA implementation are not necessarily technical in nature. They're often people problems. And so one of the things, if we're talking about individual contributors doing this reviewing, for them, there's kind of two approaches. There's the carrot, right? This is going to take you less time, Or there's the stick. We can have more of a top-down type approach to understanding the value that we're getting out of a process like this. And really, it comes down to money, right? If I've got reviewers who are marking up stuff in red pen and there's a process they prefer, that costs money, right? And it's more time consuming, not just for them, but for me as the author, right? And if we have different processes for each person who's reviewing our content, that is also not sustainable. So really, one way is, look, this is going to save you time, and that's the carrot approach, right? We can dangle that in front of them. And if that doesn't work, I mean, look, you've already invested a fair amount of money in a system like this. We need to get an ROI on that, right? And so the other thing is that this can be sort of mandated from a more executive level, or maybe the director level. Say, look, you need to follow the processes we've established with this new tool we've brought in. And really, that's how the executive suite thinks, right? They're seeing the money that's associated with the time being sunk into this manual pen-based review, right? The red pen review, as we like to call it. So, maybe two ways to approach that potentially.
So you've touched on this a little bit in your previous answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What are the things to consider when implementing this workflow?
Sure. So number one is flexibility, right? So if somebody's out of the office, or if people change roles, I need to be able to slot someone in to actually take care of their portion of the workflow, in more or less real time. So in my case, one of my reviewers was Carlene. If she is out of the office for an extended period of time and I need somebody to take a look at this content, I need to be able to slot in a new reviewer, reassign that task, and be able to move along in the process. So to me, flexibility is one of the biggest needs you have in a system like this. Not only from the scenario I just mentioned, but also from the scenario of if somebody provides you with a workflow, they just created something that they think will work for you, or maybe a CMS you have comes with an out-of-the-box workflow. That's essentially a one-size-fits-none solution, right? The workflow that comes out of the box with any CMS is not going to align with your business processes. And so, that level of flexibility and configurability really becomes important when we talk about fitting, because we can't have the tool drive your process. Your process needs to drive the tool. And so if it's configurable and flexible in order to allow you to do that, I think that's kind of the biggest thing to look at.
So for these larger DITA CCMSs, how do you justify the expense, and can it be a problem for a smaller shop, say, 2-3 people?
Yeah, absolutely it can. And so, depending on the solution you're looking at and the scale you're talking about, that can be a huge problem in terms of, I've got 2 or 3 writers. What do I need this enterprise grade CCMS for? And there are other solutions in the market that are more appropriate for small teams. But I think to address the ROI perspective, it really depends on your use case, right? There's a number of different kind of traditional areas where we're going to see significant ROI coming back from a CCMS investment. First of those is probably translation cost, right? So if I have the need to translate, and I talk to customers who need to translate into 28 different languages or even more sometimes. So really at that scale, that's when you're going to see, you'll start to see it before that, but you're really going to see the return on investment from that type of translation scale, right? The second is going to be process improvement, and that might be a smaller chunk, and it's more of a hidden cost, right? Because it's just the user's time. We're already paying their salaries. It doesn't cost us anything extra to do this, but by streamlining your processes and helping them save time, you're actually opening up more productivity for them. So that's a little softer and more difficult to calculate than the translation component is. And then we've got content reuse. So, one of the things a good CCMS will have is the ability to report on the level of content reuse I'm seeing throughout the repository. And that's really how we can start generating some ROI from that perspective and understanding what value we're getting out of our content reuse. If 5% of our repository is reused, we're probably not getting the most value we possibly can out of it. Whereas if that number is closer to 20 or 30%, that's when we start to see that we're going to go ahead and get that ROI. And by the way, that's where a good implementation partner, such as our friends at Scriptorium, comes into play.
Thank you very much for that. Got another question for you, and that is, when you are working with reviewers who are not professional full-time content developers, how do they react to workflows like this in general?
Yeah, and it's all kind of across the board, right? You get, I have over the course of the years built up a number of archetypes in my head for different types of attitudes that you see. Some of them will be really excited to be able to go ahead and just go into the web browser and make their changes real quick and be done with it. Whereas others, and it might be that they're very accustomed to the red pen process, or maybe one of the others that we looked at, they might be more resistant. So I mean, it does run kind of the full spectrum of the of reactions to this. Some people get really excited and are looking to embrace new ways of doing things, and I'm sure you've seen also in your roles. So I'm assuming we're seeing a lot of DITA implementers and DITA champions here, where you're going to have everybody, if you envision in your mind that one person that you've worked with that just objects to everything you're proposing, you're going to find those people too. And so it's really a matter of articulating the vision, understanding how they can benefit from it. Whereas sometimes you see the ROI thing, that's how the company benefits. What's in it for me, right? So you're gonna have to pull those strings a little bit and make sure that that everybody's getting something out of it. But the objections are just going to happen. That's just part of it comes with the territory.
Absolutely, and change management and a lot of communication and training can really help, address those kinds of challenges.
Yeah, absolutely.